Hello and welcome to The Knowing Show. I am your host, Christine Marie, and we are talking about, honestly, how do we approach life once the sand in the hourglass starts filling up more so at the bottom than when we started out our lives and there was just so much sand at the top. And so much of the time we're actually living our day so focused on what we're doing that we're not paying attention to that hourglass and to time slowly ticking by. And all of a sudden we wake up and it's June, middle of the year. And we also wake up and realize it's been 40, 60 years of our lives that have gone by. And how did they go by so fast? Where did they go? And I'm just so thrilled to be joined here by Glenn Hugo. Glenn, you joined us it was probably like a month or two ago.
Yeah.
And we had such an incredible conversation on relationships. You've worked in many, many different organizations. You've got your own business, serving as an entrepreneur and working closely with property managers and really helping kind of be the linchpin for all the different vendors and partners they need. You're really kind of that stable one where you're like, hey, I'm going to raise my hand and I'm going to be the one to take all of that weight off of you. And we had such a good conversation about relationships that during that time. And I saw you in Chicago 2 weeks ago, and we just started kind of having this conversation around your approach to this hourglass. You know, it seems like it's almost been flipped, and now there's more sand at the bottom of your life than when you started, and you really started just sharing some wealth of wisdom. And I wanted to get that here on the show. So thank you for coming back and joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Again.
2 times. Well, actually the request was for you to come back from the comments. So it's the people who want to do.
I'm so glad my mom and dad had joined again. It's great.
They were the one. No, I'm just kidding. Glenn, when I saw you, we talked about this concept of how you're choosing to use your time. And you said you're really seeking to do things that feed your soul. And so I want to kind of start with, what does soul even mean as we start off this conversation? Let's start with terms.
Yeah, right. So I mean, there's soul in the sense of gospel and religion, and there's soul that really just sits in. There's soul food, right? So there's the soul that's us, that gives us our energy, that nourishes us, that really sustains us. And back to the hourglass thing, where just the older you get, I think things become a little more important to you than other things. And what is enriching of your soul, what becomes enrichment is taking your time of the top half of the hourglass and what resonates with you and what gives you your energy and fulfillment and contentment.
That's so good. I love that you said effectively the soul is the essence of you and me. And Glenn, we don't talk about cultivating that. You know, in our early childhood years, it's so much focus on the mind and even physical skills.
Right.
And so the kind of the soft skills and the internal being is rarely cultivated. And so I'm wondering for you, at what point in your life did you start seeing, like, what even is the soul? Where did you start becoming even aware of that? And what was kind of your journey to that point?
Yeah, I think it really probably didn't happen until fairly recently, right? I think it's always like, for most of us, it's work, go, grow your career. My wife and I never had children, so we didn't have kind of those obligations, right? So we were just able to focus on our careers and do our thing. And then, you just get to the point where you're like, work becomes aggravating or less rewarding. And what you're really realizing is you're missing out on all the other stuff, right? You're missing out on your friendships, your family, your relationships, the things you could be spending your time enjoying, other than, let me go work a Saturday to get a budget done or go take care of a project. And so it probably was not but the last 24 months that I really got to that point where I'm like, running out of time on planet Earth. My parents are getting older, siblings getting older, family's getting older. And how do you want to spend that time, and what's going to really reward you and enrich you?
Yes. And Glenn, was there something that kind of jolted you awake, or was it just the time's running out?
I actually distinctly remember this. It happened, not surprising, this probably happened for a lot of people, it happened during the pandemic. Right? Just all of a sudden you have all this devastation going on around you, and you're like, okay, so we'll get through this. And unfortunately, a lot of people didn't. And I remember like distinctly jolting up in the middle of the night going, oh my God, I'm almost 60. There's more time behind me than there is in front of me. And maybe this is the recalibration I needed. And maybe for a lot of people, it probably was the same recalibration.
So one thing that I was actually thinking about this a couple weeks ago, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You know, you've been able to sustain that for 24 months. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people to that point actually did have kind of a jolt awake of, man, I'm spending more time with family, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm around these people and I don't like them. That's a
Right.
warning sign. That's kind of jolted awake.
True.
So there were all these different kind of wake up calls during the COVID pandemic, and I think it's almost like all of us have amnesia. It's like we
Yeah.
just went back and are doing exactly what we were doing before when we were
Sure.
so committed, like promising ourselves I'm going to be different.
Yeah.
How have you sustained that?
Yeah, it really became a conscious decision. And I think, it was easier to sustain because my career was established. I knew there was a finish line with retirement or slowing down on the horizon. And so I think you get to this point where you're comfortable in your own skin and your career is and your really your long-term friendships are, that you're able to really focus on them, and in what you might have thought was a sacrifice, whether it was professionally or otherwise. All of a sudden, you pick and choose strategically what you want to focus on and what's going to give you the most bang for your buck, and really, again, enrich your soul a little bit.
So to that point of knowing and kind of identifying what does enrich your soul, how would you encourage, Glenn? You really are a teacher. I was at dinner with you and a few others in Chicago a couple weeks ago, and I was just watching you teach, and then you were sitting on a panel the next day, and you really have a gift. So I would love if you were going to kind of teach us, how would you help us become aware of the things that are enriching to our souls, talking about feeding and nourishing our souls? How do we even become aware of that in the first place?
Yeah, great question. I think it's very different for everyone, right? But we all know where the energy sucks are in our life, right? Whether that's professionally, in our personal lives, right? We all have that friend that's the drama king or the drama queen. There are people who truly need our help and our support going through an illness or some other life challenge. But it's a conscious decision, just as it is to exercise or eat better or whatever it might be, right? It's not easy to do. It's certainly not easy to do while maintaining a career, raising a family, social commitments, whatever it might be. But it's like any habit, you get comfortable. You'd be amazed at how easy it is to say no to certain things, and people are like, okay, whatever, right? Where you used to think, oh, I need to go to this event or this happy hour or this meeting, you just make the conscious decision to pick and choose wisely, and it does take a little bit of the stress off your brow.
Yeah. So it's almost like having an inner thermometer to even know that.
Yeah.
So to that point of, you're saying effectively being able to say no,
Yeah.
and really being able to have, would you call it boundaries, or is it more so just knowing what you want at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think it's probably both of those things. Really good point, right? There's boundaries where work creeps in, right? And I think that's probably gotten actually probably a little worse post-pandemic, where everybody was used to working from home. We were probably checking emails at home pre-pandemic, and now it's just kind of morphed into the great trade-off of, well, I got to check the email at night because I'm going to go into the office 3 days a week, whatever it might be. So there's some boundaries on that. And then it's just really recognizing, is this really worth my time? As a couple of my friends used to say, is the juice worth the squeeze? What are you going to get out of this? And so, we talked about this in Chicago. I'm a big fan of networking, right? It's a great way to meet people. You never know who knows whomever. And if there's an intention behind that, and I mean that in a positive way, you're not trying to get something from somebody for nothing, but you're going to, get something out of it or learn something new about people,
Right.
and perhaps yourself or bond with somebody over some shared experience. That to me is enriching and rewarding. And it might be a one and done. It might become something more than that.
The juice worth the squeeze, it made me think about this concept of what is your return on investment?
Yeah.
And we talk about that a lot financially,
Yep.
but it's across many, many different levels of analysis. And so on the Knowing Show, we talk about different categories of the human intelligence. We talk about intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and physical intelligence. And so in each one of these categories, we make investments in people, in just the expenditure of our time. And so then it's just measuring the return for each one of those investments. And so to the point about, does this feed my soul? What are some metrics that you would encourage people to kind of bear in mind to even be an indicator that this is a worthy investment?
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure I have the perfect answer for it, right? I think a lot of it's your gut intuition. It is, if there's a common cause, that's usually a good reason to go do something, because you're with like-minded people with like-minded interests. I would caution, don't get yourself stuck in a bubble, because I think diversity and people and beliefs and all kinds of stuff, I think it makes you well-rounded. Gives you exposure to how other people, other cultures, whatever it might be. But you'd be amazed. I think this has happened to all of us, where you're like, do I really want to go to this event or this dinner or whatever it is? And you go and you're like blown away that it's somehow really does something magical for you, or you meet somebody, or you experience something, or eat some new cuisine, whatever it might be. Right. So you got to have the self-awareness of, this might be a stretch for me, or I'm thinking no, but my gut's telling me, yeah, go do this. Maybe this could be cool. And worst case, you wasted a few hours, but in the overall scheme of thing, a few hours is like one grain of sand.
Right. To that point, for those of you who are just joining, Glenn and I were talking about kind of that hourglass analogy, where we start off our life with all of the sand on the top. And as we continue living on, there's more sand at the bottom sometimes than the top. And that was kind of a big wake-up call for Glenn. And Glenn, as you're talking, I'm just realizing, like, if we were to kind of add in a visual of how to measure whether that this is going to feed my soul or not, it's almost taking into account, what even is my personality? Am I introverted, extroverted? Who are these people? Do I have past data with them?
Right.
Because that's going to be something to consider too. Do we even have any kind of data points, I guess, that could be supportive of whether making a call over whether this is a good investment? Because I love your example of, sometimes we do go to those dinners and it's like, oh my gosh, that was exactly what I needed. And if we just went with what we felt like here in that moment, we would have missed out. So kind of thinking, okay, what are all those different things to, like, if we were going to make a checklist to inform, okay, am I going to move forward with this or not? Of what a few of those might be. But I want to back up before we kind of get more granular in that. You're so good at relationships. It's really, really striking to me, and it's genuine, and you really, really care. And so as we're talking about feeding our souls, tell me how you have balanced this love and genuine care for other people and this ability to give, with also tending to yourself and having boundaries and knowing when to say no, and kind of being aware of this internal world while also equally invested in the external world. Because normally people are very lopsided in one way or another.
Yeah. So I say this all the time, half jokingly. I'm actually kind of pretty shy, not by nature very outgoing person. I struggled as a kid and a teenager with a little social awkwardness. And somehow that went away. I don't know when or how, but I am, and thank you for the kind words. I'm a teacher, all that good stuff. I think all of us probably, we have our core group of friends, and it's usually within that core group of friends, we have, the person who's the networker, right? We all have that one friend who knows everybody. We walk into a restaurant, they know somebody, they know the maitre d', whatever the case may be. And so for me, if I'm going to go to an event with somebody who's kind of that person, I think that's a great way to go meet some other people, right? Expand your sphere of people and your sphere of learning and knowledge. And, having those kind of people around you, that's not you innately, is super duper cool, right? It really does help you grow your circle. And sometimes it's just nothing other than, oh, you do this, or about that, or you brought a great bottle of wine, and I'm a wine guy, right? So it's nice to share that with people. And so I think it's just really finding your clan, for lack of a better word, right? And some shared interests and people, everybody's got their own little universe of people that surrounds them, whether it's work or clubs or social events. And I think it's just a great way to kind of get out there and see what it is. Now, with that is, is the juice worth the squeeze again, right? You need to understand what the time commitment is to do it, right? A dinner is very different than, a 3-day retreat, to do something with people you may not know or may not click with. So it's really understanding yourself and what drives your needs. For me, back to my original premise, I'm very shy, but I am also, I love being around people. That's where I get my energy. Going to a conference or going out to some social event, really for me drives my energy. Some people get it from exercising, reading, knitting, whatever it is, and there's no right or wrong answer. You got to know what kind of drives your internal energy.
I love that. It is interesting. You said drives your internal energy. Would that be akin to when people say that they're extroverted, like they actually glean energy by being around people that?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah. I think that that's so important, that we actually know that. And in being introverted doesn't mean that you're quiet. Correct. It's really just the question of where do you derive your energy?
Energy. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one or the other gets a rub, right? You put an introvert with an extrovert together and they're like, it's, water and oil doesn't mix. But if you get past that, there's probably hopefully some shared interest or something where you can connect over it.
I love this. So, Glenn, I made a little list while you were talking of what you were saying, just so we could kind of put categories around it. So, to this point of like knowing what feeds our soul, to then be able to effectively go and tend to ourselves for the purpose of loving and serving and leading better. And sometimes actually tending to our soul, to your point, is actually going out and being around other people. Or maybe it actually is, Wayne put it here in the comments. Sometimes it actually is serving and giving, and like that can replenish and fuel our soul. So I wrote down our personality type, understanding what are our values, like really truly, what do I value? Because then I can go and align myself with the right people. I don't know, Glenn, if you found this to be true, but I find it more draining to be around people that don't hold the same values as me.
I don't disagree with that, right? I think I'll never say never, right? There's some absolutes of like, that's not my value system, not going there, right? But if it goes back to, it's also a good way to understand a different perspective, right? And values kind of touch a couple of different things. Right. But but aside from that, right, it could get awkward pretty quickly, right? If you're just polar opposites and there's no in between to agree upon or discuss over, then runs its course pretty quickly.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because to your point, as long as I think that this is where it's, if someone's aligned with me in values and I'm in a season where I do need to kind of nourish myself, then I probably will find that person to be just easier to be around. It's always easier to exist in your own echo chamber. Yes. But to your point, we can't stay there. The goal is to be filled up and fueled to go out and continue this role of, not even role, but like life being a curious journey, and one where we're expanding and learning more things and putting ourselves in those uncomfortable positions. But if we're depleted, we're probably going to not be able to engage with curiosity. We're probably just going to end up getting triggered.
Correct. I think it goes right back to where we started about how so much of our energy early on is focused on careers and building our careers and starting families and accumulating things. And then you get to this point where you're like, oh, well, that's all well and fine, at least the material possessions in the career, the family is always important. There's something more for me to give, and there's something more for me to receive. And I think everybody always said this, the older you get, the less you care. And it really is kind of true. I actually went upstairs and changed my shirt because I didn't like my shirt. And I'm like, nobody's going to notice the shirt I was wearing before, but I'm like, let's put a new one on. But you get to this point where you get much more comfortable in your skin. You're willing to take some more smart, calculated risks by putting yourself out there and trying new things. I was talking about this earlier. I think we talked about it in Chicago. It's probably 7-8 years ago. I took a glass blowing class and failed miserably at it. I made 8 consecutive paperweights. I think 5 of them were supposed to be goblets. It just didn't work. I am not the artsy craftsy guy. They're like, okay, well, why don't you just mix those colors together and get green? I'm like, but I want to go back and take the glass blowing class, and I'll learn how to mix colors. I know you're supposed to learn that in the 3rd grade. So you get to this point where you have the time and your energy is a little bit more refocused, that you can make the investment in yourself without it being selfish.
Question: do you think more, like what you just said, we could take more time to invest in ourselves without it being selfish?
Yeah.
Do you think that there is more opportunity for us to do that even at a younger age, even before the sand doesn't get so heavy at the bottom?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some people are exceptionally good at it. They're disciplined in keeping a lot of balance in their life. And I think probably particularly true of the younger generation, particularly kids who kind of got through high school and college during the pandemic, right? It was probably an eye-opener. I keep referring to it because it really was a transformative event around the world. So everybody had the same shared experience. And so I think there's this level of really now truly appreciating the work-life balance and nurturing relationships and friends and family and carving the time out to go on vacation, versus, grinding it out and going, oh, you use 1 week in June and another week in December for the holidays, right?
Yeah.
Like we all did.
It's so true. I want to ask you, somebody put this in the comment that I thought was interesting, effectively how, being able to, we talking about relationships and kind of going back to that ability to enter into different rooms and be curious and really kind of hear what other people have to say. How have you allowed for yourself to do that while also not abandoning your own, like he was basically saying, forsaking truth to go be social, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that there is just a tendency to look at it being black and white, like it's either all or nothing. It's
right.
Being curious and shutting up, or it's maybe being heavy-handed with what we believe. How do you, you've been doing this for so long, like your life has been built on relationships.
Yeah.
How have you carried that balance?
I'm not sure, because I honestly never thought about it. Right? For me, it just was always second nature to do it. As I mentioned on Craft and Calling, somebody gave me an opportunity, and from that opportunity, I always said, "Oh, I'm going to reach back and help somebody do it." And I think it was part of my upbringing. We were very cognizant of people are less fortunate, people need help. I was a psych major in college. I spent a lot of time working with the developmentally challenged individuals. It does give you a lot of perspective on life, not only as the person, but the family that supports and cares for people with some special challenges. And for me, that never, or at least I should never say, try not to lose sight of that. Like even on your absolute worst day, for better or for worse, you deep in your heart, as much as it might be painful to say, you're like, I'm probably doing better than a fair number of people on God's green earth. And I should be thankful for that and stop feeling sorry for yourself and get back to it.
What a good point. There's a book called The Second Mountain by David Brooks, and it is akin to this concept of the first mountain is the one that so many of us traverse at the beginning of our life, which is our own pursuit, our own dreams, our own ideals, our own glory, let's say. And then we reach the pinnacle, and you see this all over Hollywood where they've made it, and then they're like, that's it. Like that's really all there is. And then you kind of come down that mountain and you've got the choice to climb back up the first one or to look at the second one. And that second mountain is all about community. And so I just love, Glenn, that call to take your eyes off yourself, and look at other people. And I think that to that point of take your eyes off yourself, only when we're really filled up can we do that and not be codependent.
Yeah, I think you have to, right? It's really hard to do. We live in a very competitive society, a very competitive country, and many other countries are as well. Not discounting anybody else, but that's what we've become fixated on, right? From kindergarten, right? Get
Yeah.
good grades, make the honor roll, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, all this stuff. That just keeps you kind of going, and all those things have benefit. But when I was a kid, if you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs, like, what are you doing? There's always something to do, right? You go outside and play. Here's the vacuum. You never, you laugh because it's true, because you never afforded time just to like sit and think and process.
The being in it all, and
Yeah.
you know what, Glenn, as you're talking, it reminds me that fundamentally, to be able to even do this and operate from this place, is that our value and our worth and our identity is no longer simply tied to what we do, but it's rather who we are.
Correct.
And it's a fundamental shift there. What was that like for you? Was that kind of during the pandemic as well, where you had that kind of identity shift, or was that earlier?
I'm not sure it's entirely happened yet. Right?
I love the honesty. I love
Yeah, I mean,
it, my friend.
obviously there's this realization of I was going to, wind things down and retire for whatever that means. That happened a year earlier than my wife and I wanted it to happen, is what it is. And so, quick transition. We sold the house, relocated, and it took me about 6 months to go, oh God, now what? Right, you lose, and now you see it all the time on Instagram of people plan for retirement. What they don't plan for is what are they going to do in retirement, right? It's been statistically proven it takes 183 days before people are like, okay, now what do I do? Your world is so wrapped up in your career, and your identity is wrapped up into that, and you're happy to wind down and sleep in and play golf, and then I still have more to give and do. And so,
Yes.
I set up my consulting business, which is doing well. I've signed up to volunteer at UMiami Hospital in a local arts center. Just haven't had the time to do it because the consulting stuff's keeping me busy. But it took me almost 6 months to be like, okay, I need stuff to do, but different stuff, right? It's not now it's not about me. It's about helping and really leaning into others.
And it's not to prove something,
No.
it's not to prove you're worthy of existing,
Nope.
because I think for so long we do operate from that place.
Sure.
I actually sat with that question, Glenn, earlier this week. I was driving and I just kept asking myself, what am I afraid of? Like, if I really was just going to go for it, why am I not? And what would going for it really look like? And I think that that's just kind of the continuous question of our lives, because it's so, at least for me, I'm sure for others, maybe theirs is, why am I not telling the truth, or whatever it is, like whatever their thing is. But for me, I just find that our society is so programmed to be horizontally fixated, to be looking to the right and to the left and like, what is everybody else doing? Rather than, well, what am I uniquely created for? What do I even like and want and enjoy? What feeds my soul at a very unique level, because no one else has my unique combination of soul, spirit, and experience. I'm like, man, that's probably actually going to be lonely sometimes, and how rewarding. And at the same time, the connections that come on the other side of that are so much more meaningful.
Yeah. When I said earlier, the older you get, the less you care. With that also comes, you kind of realize nobody really cared all that much up until now anyhow. Like we all get a little self-conscious of, oh, did they notice I said the wrong word, or I mispronounced it, or I had lettuce in my teeth, or whatever it is. And 99% of the time, nobody notices. And the 1% of the time, they're like, you have lettuce in your teeth, and it's pronounced whatever, right? Like I think that holds. I was guilty of this too, right? And we all are. We're afraid to stand out in the wrong way. We're afraid to fail. And when you think about all the great successes of the titans of industry and whatever they are, they've all failed a boatload to get there, right? Very few people hit the home run on the first pitch in the first inning. So, that's hindsight is always amazing, but I think that's really true. If people just cared less, not in a bad way, just cared less about what they think other people are thinking of them. You'd probably be in a little bit of a happier place, maybe.
Yeah, right. A little bit to this point, I have a question from a friend of mine here in the chat, and he says, can you tell us how you kind of think about the interpenetration of new and old relationships affecting business development? He says, should we rather bet on what is familiar or on what is new?
Yeah, great question. I am always you maintain what you know, right? It's comfortable. It's always going to be there. Maybe not always, right? But it's something you've nourished and sustained and built a relationship with. The next generation is behind us, right? And so back to my point a couple of minutes ago about leaning in and fostering relationships with people who are, in my case, substantially are old enough to be their dad, and in a few cases probably their grandfather, right? But you have that knowledge and wisdom to share with somebody, then do it. It's what better gift is there than to share your knowledge, your expertise, your life experience with somebody, and you do it in a teaching kind of way, not a pontificating kind of way. You're not the dad going, well, what you should do is like, you actually kind of help them walk through the process.
Yeah, that's good. I really appreciate that. And Glenn, we talked about this a little bit last time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this again. And actually, let's make it specific. We were talking before about managing relationships, and I like this conversation in terms of, how do you feed your soul? Because relationships are so much of that. And so making this specific, my question generally is, how do you stay in touch with people? How do you keep up with them? But then most specifically, we were just at this event in Chicago 2 weeks ago. And so how does your follow-up look like? How are you really kind of staying close with these folks? Do you have any process?
Yeah, well, it's a big question, right? So just start with them on the kind of the micro level, right? We all just have our core gaggle, right? Our family is a given, right? And then we have our core group of friends. So my two besties and I have been friends for 45 years. Met when we were 15, and we still get a chat going, every other weekend. We try to get together when time permits. And then you kind of have these bigger circles of people, some of whom when I was working, you're interacting with them frequently. And now that I'm semi-retired, I'm not in DC anymore, which was my home base, now it becomes, easier for me to pick up the phone and call them because I have the time, and they may or not pick up because they're still working. But I've alluded to this on the Craft and Calling show. I just have the big gaggle. I have birth dates or anniversaries or whatever it is, and sometimes it's just easy as a text. I did it two days ago for one of my favorite asset managers. Just happy birthday, hope all is well. And I didn't get a response, nor did I expect one, but then I got one at the end of the day. Sorry I was traveling. I appreciate the reach out. Right. Simple and easy, right? And for no other reason than she was truly one of my favorite asset managers, and good people. And, you just, sometimes it's that easy. Just, reach out and, stay in touch with people.
The saving dates, anniversaries, even honestly, I love that Facebook gives that to us. That's really nice. I know LinkedIn gives like the work anniversaries. It does. I don't think it does. It does birthdays, but I don't like if I go to someone's unique profile, it'll say birthday.
Yeah, I don't do Facebook, so, and I don't use LinkedIn a whole lot. So I kind of did it old school, like you just sitting and having a conversation or dinner or drinks with somebody, and they drop it. It's my wedding anniversary next week, and I'm like, write it on a napkin or type it into your phone to do that, and it just accumulates over the years. But that's because I'm a little old school like that.
Well, but I like that. This is kind of like, where is everything housed and stored? My darling does this where he snoozes an email
Yeah,
annually. So like it happens so he schedules it to send on the day
yeah,
and then snoozes it for a year later.
yeah.
And I like that, because what happens with that is that you can still have that personal message that you're sending, but it's
Right.
just the reminder.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise, God bless, I will not remember that.
I have them all set up as ticklers on my calendar. So,
Yeah.
it works great until you merge calendars, and then it's somebody's birthday 3 times on the same day. I'm like, oh, gotta figure out how to clean that up.
I have a question from a dear friend of mine here on the show too. He says, "Do you think altruism is real?"
In my heart of hearts, yes, I do. I truly, I am a big believer in that. And I think there are people who give with their heart for no other reason than giving with their heart, and expect nothing out of it, no acknowledgement, just they do it. And, it's a little non sequitur here. I'm watching on the History Channel. Tom Hanks did a series on World War II, and it's a little bit of a World War II buff with my dad, and it's a little humbling to watch that, right? And what a sacrifice so many people made for a greater cause. And I do believe that exists, and I think people who can do it. And for some people, it's intrinsic and part of their values system and belief system. And for others, it's not. And it doesn't make them bad people. It just doesn't move their needle for whatever reason.
I know. I think about, honestly, I mean, and just such a beautiful example was Mother Teresa, where
Yeah.
I feel like just her whole life was lived. Now, granted, people could say, well, she was doing it for God, and maybe she thought she was doing it for salvation or whatnot, but we can't judge people's motives. And I think even the belief and the hope in altruism in and of itself shows that we're longing for it, something to be good and true. And,
It would be a great question to just, poll the world on. Right.
I know, right?
I think you probably get a resounding yes, or maybe not a resounding, but hopefully over 70%.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the fact that that's even a question, it revealed a hope of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and frankly, I think that that's actually an important thing to consider. And I've never really thought about it until now. But if we fundamentally believe people are out to get us, we're going to interact with the world in a very different way.
Absolutely correct.
Than believing. No, I actually think that, I have a friend who, it's a tough relationship with them. And they've got some mental health issues. And so because of that, I'm like, I actually think that this particular relationship is hard because of mental health issues, not because you're a bad person, and granted, I do think that there's evil. I do. At the same time, to look at the world through a perspective of, I'm being defensive and I'm on guard and I'm ready to be reactive. It's a completely different approach than, being able to look at the world through a lens of love effectively rather than fear.
So definitely a different prism.
Yeah. Yeah. And to this point of nourishing our soul, well, now no one is safe. We're never going to allow anyone in if we're not in a place where we feel. It's almost like we would only be engaging in relationships when our guard is all the way up and we're good to keep them at an arm's length.
Yep.
So interesting. Yeah.
Makes for a challenging existence, right? And that's how. Again, there's no right or wrong, right? Just how folks perceive the world for whatever reason.
Yeah. Glenn, thank you so much. What have I not asked you that I should have?
Oh no, we covered it. We're good.
We covered it. We're done.
Yeah, I got to keep a little allure for another episode. I mean, could be another second part-time job for me. It's great. Yeah, I'm teasing. It has been great. Thank you for having me on, and it was so nice to meet you in person a couple of weeks ago.
I know. So it was wonderful.
Appreciate the opportunity to share my pearls of wisdom. Mom, Dad, thank you for joining again. and trust me that folks, they are not on. They don't really know how to use a computer. So
I just love your shout outs to them. It's so funny.
I embarrass them when I send them the link later. It's like, please don't do that.
That's so cute. Maybe one day I'll get to meet them. They sound really, really sweet. My mom, I was on the phone with her right beforehand. We have a weekly call on Thursdays, and she was like, I was sending you hearts during your live, and then I realized you weren't actually live, and it was a recording from the previous day. And I was like,
Right.
sorry, Mom.
It was the thought that counts, Mom.
I
Thanks.
know. Thank you so much, Glenn. So grateful for
Thank
you.
you
Y'all,
again.
thank you so much for joining us. I will see you tomorrow on The Knowing Show. Glenn, I will see you. We'll talk about when I'll see you next.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll bump paths somewhere.
I'm sure. Y'all have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you all.